Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and giving me part of your afternoon. My name is Bernardo Castro, cellist, and this is my lecture recital. So I will be talking. The title of my presentation is From Obscurity to the Stage: A Stylistic and Pedagogical Guide to the Bukinik for Konzertetüden. But before getting into some historical context, I want to give you an idea how I got to pick this theme. And it's pretty simple. I saw a video of a girl in Cleveland playing a Konzertetüden number 4, and I found it fascinating. I found it like super dramatic and super cool and super challenging. So I thought, okay, this is something I would love to play. But then I started doing some research about finding the music, about the old, because the title of that one is number 4. So okay, let me see how the other 3 sounds, because probably they're also super cool pieces. And then I realized, oh, there is literally anything about them. There was nothing. And say, okay, let me go a little bit deeper on the internet, try to find any research, any type of recording on Spotify or any platform. And I realized there was literally anything, literally nothing about it. I would rather do this in Spanish, but well, I am doing my best in English, okay? So I'm sorry if at some point I'm collapsing. So I was able, after a couple of days looking for edition, music, or anything, I was able to locate what is the current edition of these etudes, because not even the music was available on internet. And I found the editor of that music is Julius Berger, which is a very respectful cellist in Germany. He has around 50 plus record albums of music. And I contacted him. I told him, hey, I would love to develop this as my research, because I realized there is almost nothing about it. And I would love to know if you ever recorded as you already made the current edition. And he told me that it was his project, because he has been working for already like 2 decades on bringing some music that has been kind of absent from the cello repertoire. But in the end, for a schedule conflict, he's super famous cellist, he was not able to do it. And he invited me, he's the one who told me, if you do it, if you do some good recordings of it, probably you will be doing the premiere of these pieces. So between that and, well, the fact that I have to, it's welcome, that I have to do something that I found something to give to the school, to give to the cello world, I realized, okay, this is kind of what I want to do for my last project here at the LSU. So now, hopefully it's not gonna fall. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Mikhail Bukinik. By the way, all the pictures that you're seeing here are kind of also a premiere pictures, because I was able to contact the granddaughter of Bukinik. She lives in the US. She's a therapist. Probably, yeah, it will be helpful in the future. And she told me about, I explained her about this project. She was super interested about it, and she shared with me some picture about him. So this is indeed a picture of Bukinik, and she doesn't have really records about his life. But well, I thought it was cool to use real pictures, also premiere pictures for this work. So Mikhail Bukinik was a cellist, composer, cello pedagogue, and cello critic from Ukraine. To be more precise, he was born in Dubno, which is a small town in the west of Ukraine, on November 10, 1872. He kind of made this kind of map of his life from his music time until his emigration to the US. So basically he studied from 1885 to 1895. Firstly, he studied in a small town close to his town. The name is Kharkiv Music School. This is kind of a brand from the Mariinsky Conservatory from Russia. We have to remember at that time, Russia, like all that territory was the great Russian Empire. So kind of all that was kind of blended together. Ukraine was an independent country before, but well, all that region is kind of blend together at that point. So after he studied his undergrad in this small city, Kharkiv, he moved to Moscow, and he took classes with a famous cellist, which was Alfred von Glen from 1890 to 1895. It's important to remark that while he was there, he was classmate with Sergei Rachmaninoff, taking the conservatory classes, and from a cellist who did brought what I use in Venezuela as my technical book. His name is Marjan Polsky, and he's the one who basically created the whole scale system book, the most complete in my opinion, is a book for scales and developing technique. Something also interesting, later on, also with Albert von Glen, Pierre Igorsky, which was also famous cellist who emigrated to the States, studied there. After he finished his studies, he won a silver medal at cello, and the school offered him a grant to travel abroad and study. So he used it to go to Germany, where he studied with Hugo Becker, which I will explain later when I'm mentioning all these things, but he studied with Alfredo Piatti and Friedrich Bruckmacher. They studied in Dresden, by the way. Okay, so after he finishes his kind of post-graduated studies, he came back to Russia and taught at the musical college in Saratov, also branch of the Mariinsky Institute. It's important that at that point he was already not just doing cello lessons, he was also pretty active in the world of arranging lectures, recitals, collaboration. Indeed, at this point, he created what they call later the English Music Club for Lovers, which is a combination of different artists of that time, writers, painters, older musicians, and they were pushing to create activities to kind of show what was the modern music at that time. This is also very important. Those who are taking the class of modern history with me, with Professor Brett Bowell, you will recall that he mentioned many times from a book that we're reading in that class, that during the 20th century, artists were perceived as someone who was pushing the boundaries for modern, for new things. So he was pretty active on that, and later, I will also, when I am playing, I will also explain a little bit of the style he was using towards this new, the search for new sonorities, for the new, what was at that time, the new Russian school of cello. Okay, so after this period, he went to Germany, to Berlin, and a few months later, after being in Berlin, he was invited to become the soloist for the Gorlitz Symphony Orchestra. This is also kind of close to Dresden. More likely, he used his contact from his previous teacher, who was in Dresden. And this was a great opportunity for him because he was literally playing every single week as a soloist, or soloist with the orchestra, or in a string quartet. What is very important of that period is that he was playing basically not only Russian music as a soloist. Indeed, I have a quote from him during that time, talking about his performances as a soloist, and I quote, Mr. Bukinik, no, this is not a quote. Okay, the new soloist, cellist of our city orchestra, Bukinik from Moscow, showed himself to be an outstanding artist, playing for the first time a Tchaikovsky Rococo variation that had not been performed here before. I'm saying with this that thanks to his kind of pushing for the Russian music, he's the one who brought what is now a pretty high, pretty common standard on the cello repertoire, the Tchaikovsky Rococo variation. At the same time, he kind of became a bridge of cultures between Russia, or the Russian Empire, and Europe, because, for example, he was the first of playing Rachmaninoff cello sonata in D minor in Paris, or at the same time, he was the first to play Chopin sonata in Russia, in Moscow. So he kind of act at this, thanks to his activism, he kind of became kind of this exchange, cultural bridge of these two cultures. After he finished his contract, 1906 to 1919, he was offered to be teaching in the Nazis school in Russia, which is together with the Moscow Conservatory. At that time, was one of the most important music schools, music universities in Russia. And not only teaching, he also helped to develop the National Conservatory, the Society of Orchestral Musicians, and Society for the Promotion of Chamber Music. He, talking about chamber music, also was arranging performances where he was bringing music from Europe to this side of the world. So, for example, let me just find here. So he between 1906 to 1908, he was performing Beethoven. He performed Beethoven. He performed Chopin. He performed Kharkiv. He performed Hopper and many other pieces from the kind of new trends of Europe in Russia. He kind of trying to support these new artists at that time. At that time, 1917 to be precise, we have the Second Russian Revolution. This is when they abolished the monarchy and they became communist. So for a little period of time, he stopped teaching because everything was closed, and then he was moved, kind of accommodated to Kharkiv, which was his first school, where he was teaching until he left the US. He kind of got a permission from the government of the Russian Empire to come to the US with the excuse that he was just joining his son to pursue graduate studies in the US. However, he was really just emigrating, escaping from the communism in Russia at that time. What really happened when he moved to the United States, that he was perceived as a traitor in many ways. This is kind of a common thing that's happening for many artists at that time. So, if we look on records of Bukinik from Russian records, basically until that point, 1922, his life was kind of pretty well recorded. But after that time, basically, it was a deliberated erasing of his history, because as I mentioned, he kind of was perceived as a traitor, so he kind of was excluded from the Russian culture, and more likely, this is what makes me think that his pieces are not well known. But indeed, he didn't just compose the 4 Konzertetüden that I will be performing today. He also wrote fingering for scales 1, 2, and 3 octave, basic exercises for shifting, virtuoso exercises in arpeggios, 6 easy pieces, 6 easy duets, 10 prelude for cello solo, and a song for cello solo called History. Also, he was pretty active, I forgot to mention, well, in 1910, 1911, he was also pretty active playing his own composition. The first record we have of the performance of the Konzertetüden that I will be playing today is from indeed 1910, when he performed for the Nazis Conservatory in Moscow, Konzertetüde number 4, and then on 1911 for a cello competition, he again performed that together with the Fifth Suite of Bach and Tchaikovsky Variation, which was kind of the new thing at that time. So after he emigrated to the US, he basically dedicated himself for the ensemble work. He stopped being a soloist. I didn't find like an official explanation of that. However, Piatigorsky, who was a very famous cellist, also from Russia, he came a little bit after Bukinik, and he kind of absorbed all the attention because he was kind of a very interesting character, I would say. So more likely because of that, he was kind of left on a second plate, let's say it that way. But he was very active as a chamber music musician with the Ukrainian string quartet, which became a cornerstone for preserving and performing what was Slavic music, together with theater, because he was living in New York until his death. And as a musician living in New York, he was playing for musicals and theaters. More specifically, he always tried to play for Slavic things in musical and theaters. As he was very respectful in the Russian Empire, here he kept teaching, he became also an authority, but especially for those musicians and artists emigrating from the new communism in the Russian Empire. Lastly, and this is important for the literary part, he wrote his memoirs in 1944, which provide invaluable historical records about his early time when he was a classmate of Sergei Rachmaninoff. So this is kind of what we have of the life of Bukinik. There is indeed not many record of his life, and there is one book where I got most of the information. But as I mentioned, that book, the first edition, were Russian edition, and after 1922, when he emigrated, they kind of caught the life of Bukinik after the immigration. So now let's talk a little bit more about the Bukinik's concert etude. We have to define what is a concert etude, because is it a concert, is it an etude? So basically a concert etude is a piece with a goal of developing a particular skill or set of skills, but which material is developed in such a way that it has an structure able to be performed on a stage. This kind of start with Liszt, pianist, and Chopin. And basically, the concept we can say of them is when the technical aspect of the etude overpass the compositional content that want to be shown. So basically, the technical aspects become the compositional structure of the piece. As I mentioned, the premiere of the piece that we know of the concert etude number 4 was in 1910 in the Nazi Conservatory, and then he played again for a competition in 1911 in the Moscow Conservatory. About the edition, this is also pretty important for what I'm going to be playing. We don't have the original Russian edition, the manuscript of it or anything. The oldest edition that we have available is the one that we can find in ISMLP, which for musicians you will know is basically a public library online. This is kind of a screenshot of that edition. This is the Jorgensen edition dating from 1959. I was trying to purchase something more original, something from before, trying to find maybe the original part, but I was not able to do it. However, I compare the modern edition that I got from the Scott editions, as I mentioned, edited by Julius Berger, cellist in Germany, to this edition to just try to compare if there is kind of a different approach to dynamics, fingers, or musical features, but I found it very similar. I am explaining this because this is a lecture recital and it's tied together with a dissertation that I did about this. I tried to keep the most original content about fingers, dynamic, musical content, musical structure of the pieces, So I wanted just to make sure that what I was playing from the new edition was not different from the original. You will see indeed in etude number 2, I will explain this when I have to play, that many of the fingers that I'm using are kind of, I wouldn't say awkward, but more likely for modern technique, they're not the best choices that we will use as a cellist, especially for the side of the instrument and all the shifts we have to do. However, knowing this school, because as I mentioned, in Venezuela, we use the book of Marjan Polsky of the scale system, which is all the technique for the cello. I kind of was able to relate, okay, the same finger he was using for the etude number 2, indeed, is the same exactly finger of the Jampolsky arpeggio systems, which kind of makes sense because, as I mentioned, Bukinik and Jampolsky, they were classmates. So I think they represent what the Russian school at that time was kind of developing as a technical features. So I will usually say to make question in this part, however, I want to keep adding some more information as I'm going to start playing the pieces, but I would rather to do an intermission now because the pieces are very challenging, so I need to warm up a little bit during this intermission, and then when I'm playing, then I will be explaining certain features or characteristics of every piece that will complement the information that I previously mentioned. So thank you so much. See you in